This day in sports history. This episode is brought to you by the Sterling Soap Company. Sterling Soap is 100% natural and with a variety of bath soaps, shave soaps, beard balm, lotions, cologne, and many more personal care products in a large variety of scents, you're sure to find something that's perfect for you or that special someone in your life. Check them out at sterlingsoap.com. It's September 14th, and on this day throughout sports history, we had a new NASCAR track get off to a horrible start. A future NFL Hall of Famer got off to a great collegiate start, and it was a sad end to a baseball season that could have led to a couple of firsts. All of that plus a meltdown of epic proportions and a fun fact about how a certain hat may not have come to be if not for a serious illness. Stick around, this will be fun, and I bet you'll learn something you didn't know already. Let's start with what happened on this day in 1969 in what has been called the worst NASCAR race in history. Just like a race car traveling 190 miles an hour around a racetrack, there are a lot of moving parts to this story. It's a story about ego, power, danger, high speeds, shredding rubber, and a boycott. When it opened, it was not known as Talladega Superspeedway. That would come later. Instead, it was christened as the Alabama International Motor Speedway, and it was intentionally built to be bigger and faster than Daytona. Bill France is the father of NASCAR, and his family-owned business, the International Speedway Corporation, had sunk a lot of money into the track's construction. Most said at the time he'd pretty much spent all he had and leveraged himself as far as he could go to build it. He had a race date, he'd sold a bunch of tickets, and come hell or high water, by God, there was going to be a race on this day in 1969. The racetrack had a problem, though. It was too fast. It seems kind of strange, but once you understand the race technology of the time, it makes more sense. Now, construction of the track had been way behind schedule, and drivers weren't allowed to test on the track until August. But it wasn't until drivers got to the track the week of the race that problems really started to reveal themselves. When cars hit the track, they were pushing speeds of 200 miles per hour or more. A freshly paved racetrack is tacky. Combine that with tires that are not really engineered for speeds over, say, 150, 160, well, it can lead to tire failure. And it did. Cars were doing 4 laps coming to pit lane and the tires would be shredded. Now, at this point in time, the tires they were running were treaded tires, not the race slicks they use now. When Richard Petty and David Pearson and the Allison brothers got on the track, it became evident very quickly the tires could not hold together. They were coming apart, which is not a good thing at 200 miles per hour. This was also playing out during a tire war between Goodyear and Firestone. Both companies were trying to figure out how to construct a tire to handle this kind of speed. Firestone and Goodyear both promised tire compound changes. Tires were flown in, put on race cars, tested, and shredded. Postponing the race was brought up by the drivers and the tire companies. A little time, they said, and they could deliver a rubber compound that would work. Bill France said no. The race would happen on the scheduled date at the scheduled time. Fearing their race tire might fail and be the cause of a catastrophic crash during the race, resulting in a driver killed, Firestone withdrew all of their tires from the garage and they went home. The drivers were getting nervous. Now, there was a loose association of drivers called the Professional Drivers Association, and it was led by Richard Petty. Now, this was not a union per se, it was more a group of drivers who really just wanted racetracks to have a place where their wives and kids could spend the day and not be around beer-swilling, whiskey-drinking loudmouths. But with the peril that they saw on the racetrack, they started to voice their opposition to racing under these dangerous circumstances. Petty approached France about a way to slow the cars down, perhaps. France said that if any driver wanted to drive slower, they could, but they weren't going to do anything about the race cars. The track was built for speed, and those with the guts to drive it at speed would win. Bobby Allison, Leroy Yarbrough, and several other drivers cornered France at a different time. Allison offered what he thought was a reasonable compromise. He said, "We'll wire the back barrel of the carburetor shut, and we'll have a heck of a race at 180 miles per hour. France's face grew beet red, and he replied, "If you're scared, go home." At that point, Yarborough threw a right cross, and he decked Bill France. After that meeting, most of the big-name drivers loaded their race cars on their trailers, preparing to leave, but they stuck around just in case France came to his senses or perhaps a tire could come forth that could handle the speeds. Bill France had a lot of money at stake, and he was not postponing the race, and he sure as hell was not going to back down from the drivers. He looked at Petty, and he said, "If you ain't racing, you need to get off the premises." 17 drivers, including Petty, David Pearson, Bobby and Donnie Allison, Leroy Yarborough, Cale Yarborough, and Buddy Baker, all rolled out of the infield and headed home. The guys left in the garage were the Grand National drivers. Now, if they had been invited to join the PDA from the beginning of the protests, they may have joined in and gone home too. But they were not considered until after a decision had been made to leave, and by that point, France had gotten to them and offered them extra money if they stuck around and raced. But then the concern on France's part was, would people actually come out and watch these guys? He offered anybody who bought a ticket free admission to the 1970 Daytona 500. 62,000 people took France up on the offer, and on this day, 36 drivers took the green flag. Goodyear had also worked furiously to get a new, harder compound tire to the racetrack prior to the race. Those arrived the day before and were distributed to the teams. There would not be much time to test them out, so everybody just sort of hoped for the best. There was one precaution taken after the green flag dropped, though. NASCAR had a mandatory caution after every 25 laps to give teams a chance to change tires if needed. This new Goodyear compound tire held up, and there were no major accidents throughout the day and just 7 cautions. In the end, the race was run, and there was even a little controversy not related to the tires. Richard Brickhouse took the checkered flag for the win, but Jim Vandiver believed he'd actually won the race and that Brickhouse had been a lap down. Even from the race coverage that day, Bob Smith and Ned Jarrett both thought Vandiver was the race winner. Some thought there was a conspiracy to hide a scoring error to allow Brickhouse, driving a new Dodge Daytona with a wing on the back, to beat Vandiver driving an older Charger. The idea being that Chrysler execs had gotten to France and coerced a scoring error out of him to put Brickhouse on top because they wanted to promote their newer Daytona muscle car to those with a little expendable income. There was some lingering animosity between the well-known drivers and France after the race. The drivers who left were upset that their concerns were not taken seriously. France was pissed that the drivers had abandoned the race, but with time that animosity dissipated. Just 4 days later, Petty and Pearson raced in a NASCAR dirt track race in Columbia, South Carolina. And while many folks call this the worst NASCAR race in history, Petty thinks that Bill France played his cards perfectly. He said later, many years later, that the tire issues caused media coverage and interest to explode, and everybody in the country knew about this new track in Talladega after this race. This episode is brought to you by Firefly Books, and with you being a sports fan just like me, here's 2 suggestions for your next great sports read. If you love basketball, then you need to add Dave Zarum's book, NBA 75, The Definitive History. Uncover untold stories of triumph, controversy, and the greatest stars of the game. From the league's humble beginnings to its modern glory, it is a courtside seat to 75 years of NBA history. And if you're a golf fanatic, then you gotta check out Matt Adams' book, The Golf Round I'll Never Forget. I've used it as a reference in this podcast over the past year for lots of stories that I've done, and I can tell you from experiencing it, this is a great book. Relive 50 of golf's most memorable moments through the eyes of the legends themselves. It's the closest you'll ever get to walking the fairways with the greatest to ever play the game. Grab your copy of NBA 75 or The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, available from Firefly, wherever you get your books. On this day in 1991, Marshall Faulk had one of the greatest days on a college football field. Faulk had been a highly recruited guy out of high school in New Orleans, but just about all of those teams wanted Marshall to play defensive back. While that was what got him noticed at the prep level, He was not in love with playing on the defensive side of the ball. He wanted to play running back. San Diego State was the only team that recruited him to play offense and gave him a scholarship to do so. Faulk's impact was nearly immediate. His San Diego Aztecs were playing Pacific in their second game of the '91 season, and Marshall may have had to delay his coming-out party a little while longer if it had not been for starting tailback T.C. Wright suffering leg cramps in the first quarter. While Wright was on the sideline getting stretched out, Faulk got his opportunity.
Here is the give. Faulk runs right, 40, 45, 50, streaks down the sideline, going to go all the way. Touchdown, San Diego State. Marshall Faulk, 61-yard run. Here's the give. Here comes Marshall Faulk to the 40, to the 30, breaks the tackle, runs to the 20, to the 10. He's going to score. Touchdown, Aztecs on a 47-yard run by Marshall Faulk.
By the end of the third quarter, Faulk had 323 yards rushing, which had bettered the Division I freshman record by a yard. But he wasn't done yet. He picked up an additional 53 yards in the fourth quarter to finish with 386 yards rushing and 7 touchdowns en route to the win over Pacific 55-34. Faulk's 386 rushing yards set a new NCAA rushing record, topping the previous mark of 377 set by Indiana's Anthony Thompson in 1989. Faulk's record would not last that long, though. Just 2 months later, it would be bested by Kansas running back Tony Sands' 396 yards. The single-game rushing record is now 427 yards, held by former Oklahoma running back Samaje Perine. On this day in 2003, it was another guy racking up a whole bunch of yards, but this time in the NFL. The Baltimore Ravens were playing at home against the Cleveland Browns. Unlike Faulk, though, Ravens running back Jamal Lewis was in the starting lineup, and he didn't have to wait very long to start rolling numbers like a slot machine. On just the second play of the game and handling the ball for the first time, Lewis found himself a little bit of running room between the tackles, and he took off.
Second down and 9, dual tight end look, and it's Jamal Lewis. Got an opening. I'd say he's going to get his touches. After 1, he has 6. Touchdown, 82 yards.
He did that again on pretty much the same play call in the third quarter, blasting through the middle and outracing defensive backs to pay dirt, that one a 63-yard TD sprint. Lewis compiled a total of 295 yards rushing to go along with his pair of touchdowns to set the NFL record for the single best rushing day in NFL history. That record would stand for 4 years until Minnesota's Adrian Peterson pulled the old Price is Right move and beat it by 1 yard in 2007. On this day in 1994, well, it was a sad day for baseball fans, especially fans of the Montreal Expos, the Cleveland Indians, and Don Mattingly. The '94 baseball season had been on pause since August 12th. On this day, it ended for good. No more ball games, no postseason, and no World Series for the first time in 90 years. How did we get to this point? Well, as it always seems to be with any labor stoppage in professional sports, it boils down to money and how it's distributed. Major League Baseball owners said the financial viability of MLB was not great, and so they proposed a salary cap. The players balked at that, and there was also a lot of distrust on both sides. There was not a commissioner of baseball at this point, since Fay Vincent had been pushed out by the owners in 1992. Bud Selig was the interim commish, and of course he was one of the main reasons that Vincent was no longer in that role. Vincent had accused the owners, especially Selig, as the then owner of the Milwaukee Brewers, and Chicago White Sox owner Jerry Reinsdorf of collusion in free agent signings, and in essence, stealing $280 million from the players. Once it came out, Vincent said that polluted labor relations in baseball. A push was made to oust Vincent after that, and it worked. Executive Director of the Players Association, Don Fear, didn't trust Selig any further than he could throw him. A proposal was made in mid-June that dangled the carrot of higher salaries to the players, but would have cut salary arbitration, still proposed a salary cap, and free agency would have started after 4 years instead of 6. Fear rejected the offer on behalf of the players a few days later, and that's the way it stayed until August 12th when the players went on strike. Negotiations did not move the needle at all, and so on this day, the season was canceled. The Montreal Expos had the best record in baseball, and despite having one of the lowest payrolls in the majors, were playing like World Series contenders. It would have been the first time in franchise history if they had been able to keep on playing. There were no guarantees, obviously, but they never got the chance. The Expos would have benefited from a salary cap, being one of the smaller market teams. Once the strike ended and no salary cap was in place, well, they had to ship off their top talent. The Expos never sniffed the postseason again and packed up the moving vans after the 2004 season and moved to D.C. The Cleveland Indians were in a similar spot, sitting just a game out of first place and were ready to make a push for the postseason. They made a move to bring in veteran Dave Winfield to the organization to be a veteran presence for young stars Manny Ramirez and Kenny Lofton. They hadn't played in the World Series since 1954, and they were anxious to end that drought. Things didn't go south for the Indians like they did for the Expos, though. They would rebound in '95 and make it to the World Series before losing to the Atlanta Braves. And what about Donnie Baseball? Well, you can't shed many tears for the New York Yankees, but your heart does go out a little bit to Don Mattingly. The Yankees were leading the AL East by 6.5 games. They seemed to be on a collision course with Montreal in the World Series until the season was called off. For Mattingly, the Yankee first baseman for 13 years, it was perhaps his best chance to play in a World Series, but he never got that chance, making him the greatest Yankee to never play in the Fall Classic. Now, if one good thing did come out of this, Michael Jordan saw the long labor dispute carry on into the spring of '95 and decided to give up his baseball dream and return to the NBA. The strike lasted 232 days, and it is still the longest in Major League Baseball history. On this day in 2019, Nick Kyrgios had a nearly match-long meltdown of epic proportions, even for him, and it ended up costing him a lot of money. This was a second-round match between Kyrgios and Russia's Karen Khachanov in the Cincinnati Open. It started in the first set when he got frustrated at himself not being able to get his first serve in. Serving at 1-2 in the first, his first serve caught the tape and came back to him, and he then launched the ball into orbit, which was his first warning that came just 9 minutes into the match. Kyrgios kept it together enough to win the first set, though, 7-6. In the second, he started off talking to his camp in the stands about how average Khachanov was, belittling his play and saying for those who could hear that he'd be number one in the world if he played this guy all the time. Seems a bit odd considering the first set went to a tiebreak and both held serve in the second. Then serving at 4-4 in the second, Kyrgios got frustrated with the chair umpire for starting the serve clock too early.
So you start the clock when the boy's not even finished. I can see it. The ball just goes out and you start the clock. Right.
After holding serve, he spent the time during the changeover haranguing chair umpire Fergus Murphy about the quick clock. So the rule is the shot clock starts after the chair ump calls the score. Kyrgios kept up the dialogue with Murphy, point after point after point. The interesting thing is he never got a time violation. Then he started calling Murphy a potato. Then, after losing the second set tiebreak to send it to the decisive third set, Kyrgios got louder and he dropped an expletive.
The worst work in the game. The worst. Hands down. Every single time I play, he's doing some stupid shit. Every time.
Code violation on sportsmanlike conduct. Point penalty, Mr. Kyrgios. It's becoming...
At that point, after sitting the majority of the changeover belittling the chair umpire, Kyrgios took a bathroom break. He didn't really need to use the restroom, though. Instead, he used the time to destroy 2 rackets. That nearly resulted in a game penalty. But even though the television audience saw it and 2 officials actually walked behind him, nobody actually confirmed seeing it, and so he skated on that one. Then he wasted more time by regripping one of his remaining good rackets, which got him a time violation, surprisingly, his first of the match. But he never let up on Murphy. In the third, you can see the moment that Kyrgios starts to mail it in as well. He tried a flip-it volley between the legs on break point, and he missed it, and from that point on, he pretty much just rage quits. When Khachanov broke his serve for the third time in the set, he wrapped it up 6-2 in the third to advance to the third round. But Kyrgios wasn't quite done. He flung another expletive Murphy's way, calling him a fucking tool, and then he refused to shake the umpire's hand. When the fine was finally handed down for his behavior and actions on this night, there were 5 unsportsmanlike penalties, plus fines for leaving the court without permission, an audible obscenity, and verbal abuse, totaling $113,000, the largest ever fine in tennis. And time now for today's That's Got Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact. If John Stetson had not developed tuberculosis, the cowboy hat may have never come about, or at the very least, it might have looked a good bit different. Stetson was already a hatter when he was diagnosed with tuberculosis in the 1850s. His doctor said he didn't have long to live, but he suggested a move out west might do him some good. He lived in Illinois, Missouri, and Colorado, but noticed a dearth of headwear that would keep the sun out of your eyes and off the back of your neck. When he returned to Philadelphia a healthier man, he developed the Boss of the Plains style hat with a wide brim. The brim could also be used to fan the flames of a campfire or direct your cattle in a particular direction. It soon became known as the Stetson, since everyone he made had an embossed imprint of his name on it. That's all I've got for you today. This and every episode of This Day in Sports History is researched, written, voiced, and produced by me, Steve White. If you've got a moment, how about posting a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or giving it a rating on Spotify? Those are always helpful, and I appreciate it. And if you'd like to send me a message, maybe you've got a great sports story that I may have missed, let me know at thrivesweetproductions@gmail.com. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.